This week on Better Bad Ideas, we sit down with a true American patriot, John Fussell, 20 years in the Navy SEALs. We talk about leadership, we talk about patriotism, and we talk about life after being in the Navy SEALs. John tells some incredible stories. John tells some personal stories. I think you're going to really enjoy this episode of Better Bad Ideas. Let's get into it.
I'm Sean O'Brien, General President of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters.
Put your helmets on, buckle your chin straps. It's a full contact sport.
We're going to find out who has a better bad idea. 20 years in the Navy SEALs. John Fussell, Division I wrestler, Old Dominion College.
Yep.
Enlisted in the Navy after graduation. Had a great career. Navy SEAL, rose to the top of the SEALs. And then you end up in corporate America. How does that happen? What was the worst? That had to be one of the worst deployments into corporate America.
It was definitely a shock to the system. I wanted to go 180 out. I wanted to try on something totally different. And
you had no finance background, anything else like that?
No, thank God they weren't hiring me to be a finance person. They were hiring me to kind of come in and help my boss herd the cats.
So before we get into your background as a Navy SEAL, so you get out of the SEALs after a 20-year career.
Yep.
You've seen hundreds upon hundreds and commanded hundreds upon hundreds of high-level missions with a lot of success. You had a communications background, got your master's degree while you were in the SEALs, and then you come out and you work for corporate America, a financial institution. That's probably just as treacherous as anything else, just by the means of not knowing that field, right? Getting into a realm that you don't know, but I guess your training always helped you adapt to uncomfortable situations and how to survive in those situations.
Yeah, well, the job in the SEAL teams and all of Spec Ops, it rewards you if you can learn quickly while under pressure. You're going to excel, and so the guys that excel are the guys that can pick stuff up, and so that definitely helped me in my transition.
So how was that transition?
It was really interesting. I learned a lot. I worked at a very collegial, nice shop up in Boston, Wellington Management, really good people.
Say that again. Where was that?
Boston.
All right, good.
Yeah. And,
good.
Yeah.
My favorite place in the whole wide world.
But we moved up there, lived on the South Shore, worked in downtown finance district, worked at Wellington for a few years. I learned a lot of great people, still have a lot of great friends from that. But
wasn't your passion though, was it?
I know. I was a caged animal. I was trapped. I should have, I should have gone right into the sales team or something.
So you
like
come out of the sales team, right? I would assume I think you described it one time as heavily tattooed, muscle-bound, all alpha males.
Yeah, that's not too far
You
off.
go into the financial world, Wellington Management, and you're dealing with a lot of people that were born on third base and actually think they hit a triple to get there, right?
There's a few of those.
And what was that like dealing with those people? You dealt with third world nations, you dealt with terrorist organizations, you dealt with the worst of the worst and came out on top. It had to be difficult taking direction and or dealing with some of these, Richie Riches of the world.
Well, I think the challenge, there really weren't that many that were that pompous. There's a couple, right? But the challenge was, which led to what I'm doing now, was seeing the gaps. At the end of the day, I was very fortunate. Regular SEAL teams, worked my way up to the top level, which is Naval Special Warfare Development Group. That's part of Joint Special Operations Command, or JSOC. Worked there. The reality is, thank you, taxpayers. I have millions of dollars spent on me, training me to do my job for 2 decades. And I just started seeing all these gaps at that shop and other shops, where not many shops really put the value onto leadership development that the military does. The military, all the stereotypes are there. There's all kinds of messed up stuff about the military, but they do get that part right, grooming leaders. So I saw that away from the annoying pieces that said I got cut away from here. It also led to hey, I could be helpful to other shops by doing this kind of stuff for them.
Right. So you go to work there, and your focus is not on the business side of it; it's the leadership development side of it, which you thank the taxpayers for the millions of dollars of training that you went through. What is leadership to you?
There's, lead from the front, lead from the rear, motivational leading. There's all kinds of different ways of attacking it. We're stewards. We're shaping the battle space. We're shaping the environment so that people can be as effective as what they're supposed to be doing as they can. And it's thankless, it's not, if things are going well and you're getting all the praise, you're probably not leading. Right? I mean,
trust me, I know.
Yeah, I know. I mean, yeah, president
Trust me, I know.
company, you got it. I mean, it's thankless. It's like when things are going great, you're not taking any credit for that.
We have a saying that we utilize in our business is success has 1 million fathers.
Yeah.
Failure is an orphan.
Failure is an orphan. Yep. Absolutely.
And it's true. So when you were developing these future leaders in corporate America, what was the correlation between the training that you went through? Because 20 years in Navy SEALs and you did every single job there, you rose to the highest level. Your job, I think, from day one at the lowest level of the SEALs to the top level was always developing that next leader that's going to take your role. What was kind of the trajectory that ran concurrently in your role training future leaders of corporations or future leaders of any business for that matter?
Yeah, like I said, I just started seeing all these shortcomings, and some of them real big was like, there's lots of people out there doing like team building events, which are great. You should do them. It's important, right? You're, by the nature of what you do for a living, you're doing team building stuff every day when you're working together. But, if you're stuck behind a desk and you want to get out and go do an escape room with your team, great, go do that. It's a team building event. Leadership development and ethics training. And those three things were just all kind of like a duck, does three things, doesn't do any of them very well. They were all pretty bad. So that was the beginning of the courses that I started putting together.
And one thing that you taught me when I took your course was jack of all trades, master of none.
Yeah. Well, I like to say master of one.
Master of one.
Yeah.
Okay.
The old saying is jack of all, master of none.
Yeah.
I think the spec ops world, and again, I'm a little bit biased towards the SEAL team, that's my background, but all the spec ops world, it's a bunch of guys and gals that are jack of all, master of one. Because if you kind of pull the thread and, hey, what was your thing? We were talking about skydiving earlier. You're going to find the guy. Everybody's a generalist. Everybody can pack parachutes, blow stuff up, shoot weapons, do a ton of stuff. But then they've always got that one thing that they're a rock star at.
Right.
Right.
And that's their focus. And the jack of all trades is if someone gets injured or something doesn't happen as according to the plan or the strategy, that person will be able to pick up seamlessly. And
my role in combat, and when I was working at development group and teams, I was a troop commander, a platoon commander. That's a senior guy out there in command of the mission. And I'm not the guy up front kicking in the door, but I'm out on every mission running that. And that's my wheelhouse. That's what I do every single night. And I've got pretty decent at it.
So what are you doing now?
Teaching these courses. Yeah. The course you went through.
You have your own company, obviously.
Yep. We started Patriot Leadership
2010?
Development. Yep. Patriot Leadership Development actually started because I got asked to go. I was still on active duty and I got asked to go do something. So I had to clear it with legal. And they're like, set up a little LLC. So that's why
light bulb went off.
What's that?
The light bulb went off then, right?
Well, and then eventually when I cut away from the finance shop, I was like, this is what I need to be doing full time. Mm-hmm. And now it's not even, it's fun. It's enjoyable.
So what do you actually do?
The courses, well, you went through Case Study Alpha.
Yep.
We now have 3 courses up and running, and it's just that. It's a mix of team building, leadership development, and ethics training. And I think that the ethics training in particular, I was at a finance shop one time and I was asking a guy about his ethics training, and he was like, oh, yeah, we bought this software program and we got to click through these slides and it's just a waste of time. He goes, actually, I hired my high school kid. He sat at my desk and took it for me. I think that's kind of hilarious.
That's a lot of integrity.
Here's a guy who's taking ethics training. He's hired his kid to do it. Yeah. But I mean, here's a guy who's worth, he bills out at a lot of money per hour, and you're wasting his time with this like joke of a course. It's online. It's just CYA. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so he hired his kid to take it.
So if someone signs up for the course that we took, what is it based upon?
So the courses are all based on real world missions.
That you commanded in.
The first one is the one that you went through that I was in command of, and it went really sideways. As you can, I don't want to spoil the whole thing. But
let's talk about it.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit. It went sideways. It ended really poorly. And I taught that before I retired. I actually taught it as part of a lessons learned series to young guys, being like, hey, this is what happened. This is what we should have done differently. Mistakes were made before and significantly after the mission. A lot of bad things occurred, and I taught it as lessons learned. So then when I was I'd been at the finance shop for a couple of years, and I was getting pulled in a lot of directions to help people out. That's when I said, hey, I need to dust this thing off and like revamp it on an unclassified level, teach it to civilians. And so it's an interactive experiential learning, really based on adult learning theory, mm-hmm. where we get people out of their wheelhouse, right, and into an industry they know nothing about. And like we were talking about, who's got a better bad idea or bad,
That usually happens around 12:30 at night when there's about 30 Bud Lights involved.
Exactly, yeah. But it's making tough decisions on a crummy timeline with imperfect information. And for all the things that people prepare for, I know you know, probably plenty of times you've gone to your significant other, be like, hey babe, I got to give this presentation. Will you listen to what I'm working on? We prepare for all that stuff.
Right.
And when you ask people, hey, how many times have you like role played out or war gamed out an ethical dilemma? People don't, right? And so just saying that, like, for all the stuff as professionals that we're going to prepare for, when it comes to an ethical dilemma, I'm just gonna shoot from the hip on that one. I'll be fine.
Right.
Like, no, you're not.
No, I think that's the key thing that people don't understand is when you're working a problem, and one of the things that I took from your course was never stop working the problem.
Yeah.
Right, always work the problem. And the one thing that people don't realize when you're preparing for something, whether it's, in your case, a mission with your team, you're doing repetitions, you're doing scenarios, and it may not be something that's formal, it may be just something you're doing in your mind. I find myself, before I go into critical situations, whether it's a negotiation or a picket line or a strike, I'm always preparing in my mind on how I think it should go.
Right.
And if it doesn't go the way that is planned, not panicking and pivoting, moving, and trying to execute your mission and or your task without having to think, not looking at a playbook,
right,
having some instinct. And that happens by going over repetitions, preparing. Talk about some of that stuff with the SEALs.
Well, I think one of the things that leads to the high level of success, and the SEAL teams aren't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but the high level of success is the robust mission planning process and preparing for the missions. You have to, whatever industry you're in, you have to resist the temptation of being like, I've been around, I've seen this, I've been doing this for 32 years, I've seen a lot of these, this is how it's going to go down.
Yeah, been there, done that attitude.
Yeah, this is how it's going to go down. And with your experience, you could probably walk into anything that's blowing up in your crew and say, hey, this is probably what's going to happen.
But I'll tell you though, it's funny. I had this conversation recently with someone. I'm like, we've been around a long time, and we're young men. We're in our early 50s, and we've been doing what we've been doing for a long time. And I'm fascinated always when situations come up and you think you've seen it all.
Right.
And then something comes out of nowhere and you're like, where the fuck did this come from? I've never experienced anything like this.
Yeah.
And I think, to your point, there's a lot of people out there and that have been doing jobs a long time that take for granted that because they've been there a long time and they've had some success, that they really don't need to focus on anything else but their past. And I think that's important to always look in your past, but always trying to be on the cutting edge and try and not get complacent and think because you've been there and done that it's going to be the same experience.
Yeah. Well, like I said, you got to resist that temptation of saying, hey, I've seen a bunch of these, this is going to happen, because we're the long beard guys in the crew, and we've seen a bunch. You have to prepare for everything that's plausible. Like these are all the contingencies. This thing could go 50 different ways. What if, and you got to prepare for all of those, and then accept again that none of it will unfold exactly like that. But if you prepare for the 30, 40, 50 things that are plausible, right? And then whatever does occur, something that's like, I've never seen this shit before, right? You're going to be close. You will have prepared for something that was pretty close.
There'll be enough leeway to correct it.
Yeah. Whereas if you just prepare for the one thing that's most probable, yeah, you're right. It's probably a 90+ chance percentage chance that's going to happen. But on that 5 or 10% where it's not, now you didn't even think about it. Now you got a 180 shift to like play pickup basketball, and that's not a great situation to be in.
This episode is brought to you by Catches Law Group, proud advocates for injured workers and their families since 1986. If you've been hurt on the job, navigating the workers' comp system can feel like fighting an uphill battle. That's where Catches Law comes in. They've recovered over $3 billion for hardworking people just like you, and they don't back down when your rights are on the line. They know what it means to stand shoulder to shoulder with unions and workers across the country. Because at Catches Law, it's not just about compensation, it's about justice. Learn more at catcheslaw.com. That's KECHES law.com. And I'll tell you, I've had the opportunity to watch the success that Catches Law has had on behalf of injured workers across the United States. No law firm fights harder. No law firm is more committed to making certain injured workers and their families are taken care of. And again, that's catcheslaw.com, KECHES law.com. So talk about your career and your ascension through the military into the SEALs, and if you could, talk about some of the missions.
Yeah, we grew up wrestling all through high school and college.
You have 4 relatives in the Navy SEALs.
Yeah, so I have a bunch of military service in the family. My mom's brother, my uncle, was a SEAL Team 1 guy, Vietnam guy. And then big gap between him. I was the second one coming in, and then right behind me, my younger brother came in, and then a few years after that, my cousin came in. So the 4 of us. And
your dad was a Green Beret, right?
My dad was in the Green Berets. Had an uncle was a Marine, a couple cousins that were Marines, or one cousin was a Marine. So, but
those must have been some interesting family gatherings back in the day.
I was, it was always background. My grandfather fought in World War II. It was always there, but it wasn't something that really defined everybody. It was just something they did. And because of 9/11, honestly, like I'm the first guy that did a full 20-year career.
Yeah.
And that probably, if 9/11 didn't go down when it did, I might not have stayed.
Yeah, one of my biggest regrets in life is not going in the military. I was playing sports, played football a little bit in college.
Yep.
But that's one thing that I look back on and say, you know what, I probably should have did that. I love this country, love serving it. My grandfather was 82nd Airborne, World War II, pretty decorated. We really didn't know that till later on in life. But, I think military service is extremely important to this country. And my hat's off to anybody that enlists, whether you're going in as infantry or whatever you're doing.
Sure.
It's still a commitment. It's still serving this country. But when you went, you played Division I wrestler. You were a scholarship Division I wrestler, captain. So you had leadership qualities back then, probably all through high school as well. Did you think you were going to be a Navy SEAL?
I went in the Navy. I started doing my homework on what I could do in the military, and I looked at flying, I looked at several things, and then eventually all roads.
But it was never pushed on you by your parents?
No, not at all. Not at all. And I decided I wanted to go and did my research. I decided to, you got the officers and the enlisted guys. The military is about 90% enlisted folks. That's kind of your worker bees, broad generalization, right? But I decided to enlist. I was a college grad. I could have gone the officer route, and I decided to enlist.
So you went through basic training?
I went through boot camp, and then I went straight. In the Navy, they got to give you a job. They call it your rating. So because they got to know what to do. With a 85% washout rate at SEAL training, they got to know what they're going to do with you once you quit that. And so I got a source rating in the Navy. So that would have been my job if I didn't make it into the SEAL.
So when you enlisted, did you know that you wanted to be a Navy SEAL?
Yeah, 100%. That was.
So you were up front and said, "Look, this is what I want to do." Did they ask you, or?
It was very different back in the day. It was no guarantees. You just went to boot camp and then rolled the dice and hoped that you could pass the test. And nowadays the guys have contracts. They're guaranteed to get a shot to go to SEAL training. It's very different.
Right.
So, but yeah, I got through, went to SEAL training, got through SEAL training. And
so what's SEAL training like?
It's a pretty amazing process, man. They've been doing it for a long. It's the longest uninterrupted spec ops training that we have in the nation. It's been around since like 40, whatever. It's been around long.
So you graduate boot camp?
Yeah, boot camp. That's just standard welcome to the Navy.
Then you do what?
I went to A school. I got my rate, which was I was an intel specialist. So if I had not made it through BUDS, I would have gone off to the regular Navy as an intel specialist for a couple of years. Got through that, went straight to SEAL training. SEAL training is 6 months long. It's incredibly well thought out. It's been going on for years. It's cut down into 3 phases. First phase is just a straight up physical beatdown. That's when you probably heard of Hell Week. Hell Week's during first phase. It's about the 4th week now, I think. Middle phase is again just a physical beating, but they put scuba tanks on your back and they call it dive training. And then 3rd phase is just another physical beat down, but they put a gun in your hand and tell you you're learning some more land warfare tactics and stuff. So, but it's an amazing process. It's my class was very typical, classed up with 178 guys, graduated with 28.
And that's a 6-month training process.
6 months, yeah.
Okay, so at that point in time, you graduate, and you're considered a SEAL at that point.
Not yet.
No.
So you get through that. And again, this has changed. Now they have a SEAL qualification training at the end of that. I think that's 9 months long. At the end of that, guys become SEALs. So the pipeline's about a year and a half or something like that.
Now, does it take you multiple tries to get through BUDS or SEAL training?
Guys, I got hurt, so I had to roll classes. I never quit or anything like that. I just was physically needed a break because my legs were messed up, and so I rolled back to didn't graduate with the class I started with.
Okay,
that's about half the guys. So
you had to go through the whole training again?
No. You just pick up where you left off.
Okay,
depending. Sometimes you got to go back. So, but we graduated 28 guys, roughly half. 14 of those guys went straight through, and 14 of us rolled in and joined that class.
So if you get injured, doesn't mean that you're out. You can, if it's nothing serious, you get another opportunity.
You can. It depends how far along in training you are. If you're a week into it and you got some major injury, they haven't invested much
You'd
in
be a
you.
liability
They'll
at
probably
that
get
point
rid of
in
you.
time, yeah.
By the time I was hurt, I was 5 months into a 6-month program when I was like, hey, my legs are a disaster. So they're like, all right, you just take a break, class back up.
So you go to the 9-month training, become a SEAL.
Yeah, so you go through, nowadays you go through that, you go through SEAL qualification training, become a SEAL, go check into your first SEAL team, and then the SEAL teams are on generally roughly like a 2-year cycle. So you train, and then deploy and go forward and do your job.
How is it walking out of training as a new SEAL into a SEAL team that has been cohesive for a couple of years? A lot of guys saw a lot of stuff together.
Yeah,
and you're the new guy coming in. What is that like?
It's very intimidating, and it's also an eye opener, and it's also like the big huge slice of humble pie because you can make a really good argument, and people would argue this. You can make a really good argument that SEAL training is one of the toughest programs out there, and it's tough, right? But everybody and your brother is telling you when you're going through, this is the toughest training in the world. And you're watching guys that were just physical beasts just quit left and right and go away. And all of a sudden when the dust settles, there you are and you made it. So you start, a lot of guys start believing their own hype a little bit. Like, hey man, I've got this. I'm like super, I can run through brick walls. I got this. And then you check into a SEAL team and just everybody's just kicking your ass, man. Like in everything, out shooting you, out running you, out swimming you, everything, just running circles around you. And not just guys, you're a 25-year-old young stud, and you got a guy who's 35 and 40 years old just crushing you, So that's the humble pie. Like, hey, this is not, you just showed up. You're borderline useless to us. You know nothing about being a SEAL. It's time to buckle.
So there's not a lot of hugs and
no, not a lot of hugs.
not a lot of hugs, not a lot of compliments.
Yep.
So how do you prove yourself walking in the door like that?
Just got to be there. You got to be prepared for every evolution, right place, right time, with the right gear, ready to go. Mentally engaged every single time. Don't let a single rep slip by without learning from it, and just show constant improvement, man. Be a team player. Always be volunteering, getting stuff done.
So you actually became a SEAL before 9/11.
Yep.
So what was the SEAL teams like prior to 9/11?
So what
was a day in the life like?
We were just training for what we thought war was going to be like. We weren't, my first couple of years in the teams, we weren't at war. And there was a handful of guys who had seen some stuff. There's guys that had been, I was at SEAL Team 4 initially, which back in the day, the SEAL teams were regionally focused. So we covered South America. We had some guys that had been on Patillo Airfield when we invaded Panama, just cause. And so there was some experience from that. There was a scattering of guys. There was even some Vietnam guys that were still in the SEAL team in the late 90s. So there was a handful of those guys.
Those guys must have been something else. Huh?
Yeah. That was a different animal. So we were just training for what we thought war was going to look like. And then boom, 9/11 went down and everything changed.
So what were you doing when 9/11 happened?
So I'd done my first few years as an enlisted guy. I had decided to become an officer. I went through officer candidate school, got my commission. I went out to the West Coast. The odd number teams are out west.
So you're a SEAL and then you became an officer?
Yep, within the SEAL teams. And so I went out to the West Coast. I changed coast. I'd been working in the jungles, and at that time, SEAL Team 3 did the Middle East. Nobody wanted to go to SEAL Team 3 because it was peacetime. Like, you wanted to go to a fun deployment. You wanted to go to Germany and ski with the Germans and drink beer, and because we weren't at war.
Right.
So SEAL Team 3 was the Middle East. Like, nobody wanted to go to the Middle East. There's no good liberty. There's nothing fun to do. It's hot and it's desert warfare. But I'd volunteered to go there because they were the only ones remotely doing anything. There was some shipboarding stuff going on. So I volunteered to go there, and I wanted to learn a different operation.
Well, Desert Storm happened in like 90, 91, right? So were the SEALs involved in Desert Storm?
A little bit, not a whole lot.
So you go to the Middle East, you're probably looking back, hey, 10 years ago, we had this Desert Storm.
Yep.
Maybe there's going to be an opportunity, right?
That was pretty much it. Yeah. So I volunteered to go there, and as soon as I got there, I deployed immediately. They needed a guy overseas, and I was a young bachelor. I just deployed immediately, came back from that, and then got into a workup cycle. And we were like maybe halfway through our workup cycle, about an 18-month workup cycle when 9/11 went down, and we deployed 12 days later.
So where were you when 9/11 went down?
I was in San Diego driving to work, early riser. Heard the first one on the radio, and I was in my platoon hut when the second one hit. And then we knew we're going, we're blowing out of here. So we blew out first wave of Operation Enduring Freedom. We were gone 12 days later because we were the Middle East guys. So we were the first ones to go.
What was the feeling in your body like? I mean, you had to, this is something that you trained your whole entire career for.
Yep.
And, cowardly terrorists attacking the United States. You're going to go over there You know you're going to lose friends. You may lose your own life.
Sure.
What is going through your head when you get the call?
You're going to be gainfully employed. I mean, I kid around somewhat. I mean, like, surgeons don't sit around at night and pray for car wrecks, but they kind of do. You know what I mean? Like, be careful what you wish for, but you know,
Never
you don't
thought of it that way.
You don't. I mean, you know, I don't mean to
Never
be
thought
too
of it
cynical,
that
but
way.
like, you know, you go through all this training. You want to test your mettle and prove that, like, hey, I can do this job. This is what I signed on for. You're not a psychopath or anything. You're like, hey, this is what I've done. This is what I'm trained to do.
Yeah.
Let's go get.
This is what the government's invested millions of dollars
they've
in.
trained me. Let's go do this job. You know, and you know, and so next thing you know, like, we're up and running, and things changed drastically. You know, we got over there. We're like, this is not what we were training for. This is, you know, we were training all the legacy stuff in Vietnam and other places. Like, this is totally different.
Training in the jungle, right?
Well, I mean, the tactics were different. Technology had evolved so much. I mean, there was no, we didn't have any eyes in the sky like now. Now we got drones flying all over the place. So we evolved very, very rapidly.
So where'd you end up your first mission?
The first one, when we blew out, we were supposed to go to Afghanistan. We did not get into Afghanistan. We were still part of Operation Enduring Freedom. We ended up doing all the MEO shipboardings in the Gulf. So we were based out of Bahrain. Didn't get into Afghanistan on that deployment. Did a bunch of shipboardings. It was about the second best show in town. There was really only a couple of SEAL platoons that even got into Afghanistan for the first 2 years.
And why is that?
Because we were still legacy based. We were still tied to our commitments around the globe. So
even though there was a tremendous attack against the United States, you couldn't utilize the resources because you had prior commitments with other nations around the world.
Yeah.
That's
and
crazy.
So then
right?
everything changed very quickly. Everything changed, and then it was like, okay, no more covering. You cover Europe, you cover the Med, and boom, we're going to where the wars are. So that happened really quickly. I came back from that. I wanted to come back to the East Coast. At that time, they were standing up SEAL Teams 10 and 7s. They were setting up 2 new SEAL teams. So I got to be it's called a plank owner. I was the original company at SEAL Team 10, and we went to Afghanistan with Team 10.
And you were the commander of SEAL Team 10?
I was the number 2 guy for that.
Number 2 guy?
Yeah, number 2 guy. And I was the number 2 guy at the SEAL Team 3-1, and then I was the number 2 guy again. I got to do 2 pumps as the AOIC, the number 2 guy.
So does the number 1 guy pick his number 2?
Not really. The sort of head shed picks the top couple, and then the top couple, you kind of have your little NFL combine draft, and you start pulling other guys in. So build out.
Like, do you guys look at someone and go, no, not him?
Oh yeah, I mean,
really?
Yeah. I mean, every barrel. I kid around. Every barrel's got a bottom. You know,
It's like, you know, in my neighborhood, you play street hockey and you throw your sticks in, and you know who the worst kid's stick was, and you're throwing on one side, throwing on the other, and everybody's just avoiding throwing this kid's stick.
Yeah,
because they don't want him on the team. So that happens in the military.
Yeah, they kind of get worked out pretty quickly. I mean, it's very small numbers, but there's the occasional guy that'll get through SEAL training or Army Ranger training or Green Beret training who just not cutting it, and they get weeded out pretty quickly.
Who weeds them out? They're the team.
The team just like, this is not for you. You're just not cutting it. You can't do it.
And where does that person go?
It depends.
He's still a SEAL.
Yeah, he might lose that status. It depends.
Well, who makes that determination if he loses the
the
status?
overall leadership of the command. You know, if it's a bad performance thing, you're probably going to lose the status.
So
of being
imagine
SEAL.
going through all that training.
Yeah.
Right. And you know, you've made it. I mean, it's a huge accomplishment. And then you get into a platoon where, you know, you're the least best.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're done.
Yeah.
Can you still consider yourself a Navy SEAL?
Well, I mean, if you're getting washed out, like you're not meeting standard. It's very small numbers.
Right.
Of a guy who you're just not cutting it. You know, but it does happen. I had to let a guy go one time, and then other guys get in trouble to do something stupid. Then you get in trouble, you lose your
You
status.
get better bad ideas.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a lot of 3 a.m. decisions or whatever. Yeah. And but then there's
some of those are good decisions though.
There's a lot of stuff. There's there's the mobility side of the house, which are the boat drivers that get us places. Those guys are amazing. They're not
helicopter
SEALs.
pilots.
Well, you're not within the SEAL teams, but yeah, there's other branches that do things like that. So there's lots of great. I mean, the Spec Ops world, it doesn't happen just by the Army Rangers, Green Berets. Like, there's a lot of people involved in making the whole thing happen.
Yeah, that's a fascinating group. I don't think a fascinating process, I should say, with a lot of groups involved.
Yep.
Right. Special Forces. You say Delta. You say Navy SEALs. You say Rangers.
Yep.
Right. I mean, that's a group that you all work together. Right. So your first mission in Afghanistan, tell me about it.
We was not, it wasn't super sexy. We ended up, we were there early. We were there with the fall of 2003, and we were doing a lot of mounted patrol, so driving around in Humvees, like clearing these villages. as you probably remember, right, about 20 months after the attacks, President Bush stood on the aircraft carrier. I think it was the Abraham Lincoln. Announced a big banner behind him, mission accomplished. And then Rumsfeld at about the same time announced, major combat operations in Afghanistan are done. The bulk of the country is
Still
secure.
never caught bin Laden.
We were over there when it happened. I was like,
but weren't you guys over there to catch bin Laden, right?
Yeah, that was mission number one for sure.
Mission number one. And it took, what, 12 years?
11 years? Yeah. But that got announced. And then in retaliation, the Taliban guys, Mullah Muhammad, I think, he said, hey, we're going to ramp up jihad along the infidels along the Duran line, which is the AFPAC border. So that got things hot. And then again, in retaliation to that, we launched Operation Mountain Storm, and that was all on. So we were working Operation Mountain Storm stuff all along the border, clearing villages. It was, the first time, like getting shot at for real the first time, kind of brings a chuckle because you've been shot at so many times in training, and then all of a sudden you're over there and someone's shooting at you. You're like, literally almost chuckle. You're like, we're actually getting shot at today. Like, okay, we're going to do this.
For real. This is for real.
We're going to do this now. So, but that was a really interesting time. We left there. We were there the winter of 03-04, and typically the winters are a little bit slower because the passes get snowed in, so
right.
a little bit less foot traffic. But we were still relatively busy for a winter deployment.
Right.
And then we took off. Actually, that time, remember the Pat Tillman story? We were talking about Pat Tillman, the football player. His crew came in when we were leaving in March of 04. They were the guys coming in, so they assumed the mission set that we had been doing for like 6 months. And sadly, he was only in country for like just over 2 weeks when he was killed.
Right, they were kind of ambushed, right?
It was an ambush happened, and then it was fratricide. It was a blue on blue friendly fire situation. Yeah. It was really, really, really tragic.
Yeah, no, that was
that guy. I
remember the controversy, and that guy was a rock star, though.
Just a patriot on next level.
Yeah.
Walked away. He had a $10 million contract, I believe.
Right.
Walked away from that to go fight for the country.
I think his brother joined as well.
His brother was Kevin. It was his brother. I never met either of them. Kevin was a minor league baseball player, so he was a pro athlete as well.
Right.
And they both signed up. They both signed up together, man. Amazing.
So what was your toughest mission over there where you commanded it, and you, or take us through your toughest mission, and what is it like prior to going in and executing this mission? What is that preparation like, and who's involved, and how does it go down?
Well, the tough stuff is always, we lost guys. That's always really hard. And lost a lot of friends. That's the hard stuff. The missions, they're physically demanding. We're working in the foothills of the Himalayas. We had nights where you're just like 3-hour, 4-hour patrol to get there, up and down, 8,000-foot mountains to get there in the middle of the night, walking on night vision for hours and hours and hours to get there. I mean, just physically crushing you. That's before you even get to the objective. You're just relieved to get the objective.
What is the objective?
Well, if you're the character we're going after, you're the bad guy. We're going to find you. Capture, kill missions. And it's up to you. If you want to pick a gunfight, I wouldn't recommend it, but go ahead and we'll do that. And if you want to come peacefully, then we'll do that as well. So if you capture guys, you're not going to get a whole lot of information out of a guy who gets killed,
right?
But so if you can capture guys, you can interrogate them and find out what's going on. So kind of complete the mosaic and figure out who's working for who.
Right.
But that was us, capture, kill. We just night after night after night doing that.
So what's the planning like going out on a mission?
It's like we were saying earlier, contingency after contingency, prepping for everything. And guys all have their own pieces. You got guys planning the routes, guys doing the sniper coverage. So everybody does their planning. And it's
so during the day though, during the day you must have meetings, right, wherever you're at, and you have analysts, you have people that give you intel.
Sure.
And the whole team's involved in this. And most of the missions are done at night, I would assume, right?
Almost like the vast majority.
Right.
Nighttime.
So your day starts at what time on this mission?
Like right about now, right around dinner time, watching the sunset.
And what are you doing?
Having a cup of coffee, watching the sunset. But my day would always start out like straight to you talked about the intel analysts. If it wasn't for the intel analysts, we're just a bunch of meatheads walking
And they're
around.
civilians, right?
No, they're military.
They're military? Yeah,
we're military and also civilian. Generally at the SEAL teams level, you're working with all military folks, and a little bit of some agency stuff. And then the next level up, the tier 1 stuff is Joint Special Operation Command or Development Group there. Then you got a whole lot more interaction with all these agencies. So some really world-class intel agencies. But like the intel, like I said, they deserve all the credit in the world. If it wasn't for the intel crew, we're just a bunch of meatheads stumbling around in the dark. We wouldn't even know where to go.
So you tell during one of your classes a great story about how there's a lot of egos involved, right? And you were telling a story one time about an analyst, a 25-year-old female analyst.
Oh yeah.
Share that story. I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, it was a really interesting night. There was this guy we were going after. He was a dirtbag. He was a shadow governor. He was doing just atrocities. What he was doing, he was just executing people, and we were watching it.
From the Taliban?
Yeah, he was a Taliban commander, and he was publicly executing people and just nasty. And so our motivation level to get him was pretty high, but he was pretty elusive. We hadn't seen him in a while. So finally he popped up. The intel analysts figured it out, and they were like, "Hey, we found this guy." So I immediately, I'm there having my morning cup of coffee, and they're like, "Boom, boom, boom, this is the guy." And I said, "Well, where is he?" And it's like, "Well, he's in this village." And we'd been to that village before. It's always a hornet's nest. Every time you went in there, it's going to be a firefight. And then I said, "Well, where is he? Which compound?" They're like, "Well, he's at this compound." And like Murphy's Law, it's the biggest compound, highest ground, most well fortified, hardest nut to crack in that whole town. And then I said, "Well, why is he here now? This guy's been gone for months. Why is he here now?" And what we found out was that the conventional coalition forces had been doing a cordon and search, which is just a big sweep. I mean, it's not. I would just, if I could end it, I would. It's just sweeping through an area, patrolling to contact, waiting to get shot at, and then those must be the bad guys. It's not the greatest thing, but that's what they were doing. So they were doing that for several days, and because of that, this whole town that was like a hornet's nest was just super spun up. So we're not going to be sneaking in there at 3 a.m. and not have people be awake. So that was bad. And then so finally, I decided to cancel the mission because it was just stacking up. This was all looking bad. It was definitely going to be a hornet's nest. And the final two factors that I said, no, we're not going, because it was actually the lunar cycle and the weather. It was a big old full moon, and it was a beautiful night, though, in the cloud in the sky. So it was basically broad daylight, right? And we knew we're going into this mess of a town, right? So I said, hey, we're just not going to go tonight. We'll keep tracking this guy. We'll get him tomorrow. We'll get him down next week. Whatever. Something's going to change. We'll get him. And so we canceled the mission. Key leaders stayed there, heads down, crunching, trying to figure things out. Guys went about their routines, got some chow, hit the gym. And
how many guys are on this mission with you?
We probably went out on that with all in about 40 guys, and at about the 11th hour, this young analyst, young woman, she was in her early 20s. We're all like late 30s, early 40s, bearded up, meathead, intimidating looking bunch of guys, not super cuddly. And this young woman who's 15 years younger than any of us, she worked for one of the alphabet agencies here in DC. And she came to us. She's like, hey, you guys I think you missed something. We're like, all right, well, we got like 5 minutes to make.
So it must be pretty intimidating for a person that, works for one of the alphabet organizations who's not in the military, right?
Right.
Coming to you, who, to your point, you guys are all heavily tattooed, bearded, adrenaline flowing, and she's going to tell you that you missed something. She
did, and good on her. I'd like to think I was part of the reason that happened, and I give huge credit to all the guys that had the fortune to be in command of. Like, the guys had created an environment where she knew, like, we valued her opinion and everybody's opinion. If you see something, say something, bring it to us, right, in the right way. So she knew she wasn't going to get her head chewed off. Like, she told us, she's like, hey, I think you missed this. We're like, all right, well, what do you got? And what we had missed, and shame on me, I had canceled the mission. The valley that we were going to, she goes, look, this valley is almost perfectly north-south running. It's really narrow with really big mountains on both sides. I know you're hung up on the moon. The moon's actually going to set about 45 minutes before first light. And she pulled it up on some computer stuff and like showed us. And basically the moon was going to set, that giant shadow was going to sweep across this valley, be pitch black for about 45 minutes. And then first light coming up in the east. And she was dead on, So we hustled, we got out there, we ended up going to the objective and getting the guy. Because of her weighing in, which is huge, So we mentioned earlier, like, say, never stop working the problem,
right?
Good on her, because we had, I admittedly, I threw in the towel before I should have that night, and she was going to keep working that problem until there was 0 seconds left on the clock for tonight.
So when you say you got the objective, did you extract him or he didn't make it?
So what we stumbled into that night, we knew he was a top level guy. We expected him to be guarded by a security team, probably 6 to 8 guys guarding him, and we knew they were hardened soldiers. They wouldn't be sleeping in the house. They were going to be outside. So we knew that going in. What we didn't know was that he had extended hospitality to some of his top lieutenants, and because of this big fight that was going on in his town, it was his hometown. So he showed up kind of to save face. And a big gunfight going on in your hometown. If you don't show up, everybody's going to think you're a coward. So he came to town because of that. He extended hospitality to like 7, I think, of his top lieutenants. and they were all senior enough to have security details, right? So we thought we were going up against one guy guarded by 8. We ended up going up against 7 key targets, and each one of them had a security detail of 5 or 6 guys. So there was, 30 to 40 guys outside versus 8. So it ended up being a little bit, we did get in a pretty significant engagement with those guys, but got in and out of there, got the bad guys, and everybody got to go. We get to tell a story. We get to tell a story they don't. So
That's great. So what happens after that mission? What's the
debriefing process?
The debriefing process, which I think is fascinating, and that's probably one of the best things I've taken out of your class.
No, I'm glad that that's hit home. We the military's got gobs and gobs of paperwork, and it's important that the paper trails matter. Your after action reports are important to write, but we realized pretty quickly like the process was just too slow. Not so much at the SEAL teams, but at the National Mission Force level, the tempo is just crazy. I mean, multiple times, dozen plus times, did 2 missions in a night. 2 or 3 times, did 3 missions in a night, like that busy. And so the paper trail, it's important. You still got to do the paper trail eventually, but we needed to debrief faster and more honestly. And we needed what happened at 2 a.m. to save somebody's life at 4 a.m. So I think we actually adopted the term from the aviators, the hot wash debrief. And it was just a debrief, closed door session just for the crew that was out on the mission right after the mission was over.
No analysts, nobody, just...
We'd expand later to involve them, but the initial one would just be the guys that were boots on the ground.
And what is your focus on during these hot washes? It's focused on what went well, what didn't go well, what we could do better. And I think during your seminar, again, you referred to, look, we're all alpha males. We're all very capable people. And, it's easy to point the finger at what people didn't do right. But I think one of the philosophies that I took out of it, and I think, you articulated very well, is that when you're talking as a leader in front of your platoon or your team that you're leading, you point out what you could have done better as a leader first, right?
Yeah.
Can you explain that?
You've run around with no shortage of alpha types. And if your format is like, hey, let's circle it up and just start throwing daggers across the room at each other, it's going to be a fist fight pretty quickly, almost every time, right? So our format was
you point the finger at someone.
Yeah.
There's the punch being thrown, right?
Yeah. So but we went group by group, phase by phase, and it was always this is what I did, this is what I messed up, this is what I could have done better, this is something new I saw from the enemy, a new tactic from the enemy. Got to share that immediately because that could save somebody's life on the next mission, right? So kind of going around, and then there's always room for constructive criticism, but generally there was really very little of that needed because everybody knew the format so well. If somebody messed up, they were the first ones to raise a hand and say, hey, I did this, I should have done that, I didn't, if you don't weigh in with that information, someone's definitely going to call you out on it. So that was a game changer. Of course, then later as in my role as a commander, I would have to go then put fingers to keyboard and write up an actual after action report, but that would give me a lot of meat to then write it with.
Right, because you're talking to your team and saying, hey, look, we may have been successful, but how could we have been more successful? What could we have done better?
Yeah.
And I think that's probably one of the most valuable things. How was it like transitioning, that philosophy into the post military career for John Fussell? When you're talking to a bunch of corporate finance people, I would assume you obviously taught them about the hot wash.
That was one of the first things that really dawned up when I started seeing some of these things that I think I could weigh in and be helpful with. And that was one of the first. I was at a very high level meeting. I was at the same shop. I was up the spectacular top floor conference room overlooking Logan, overlooking the Boston Harbor. And it was all the senior people in our company. I was over in the corner, just like my boss he was front row. I was over in the corner taking notes, trying to keep up. And very, very, Gary Cohen was there. Gary Cohen is, he was giving his thoughts on Brexit. This was like 2015. And he's giving his thoughts on Brexit. And I watched this meeting go down for like 90 minutes. And then I watched everybody just scatter. And I grabbed my boss. I was like, hey, well, what's going on here? He's like, what do you mean? I was like, where is that information going? That was an amazing meeting, right? He had a lot of really interesting thoughts on Brexit and all that stuff. And my boss, I had only been there a few months. He's like, no, this place is super collegial. People will share that information. And I remember, I was like, no. I was like, I disagree with you. I was like, I think that best case, maybe 11 people on our side of the table. I was like, best case, a few of y'all are going to say something to somebody about something. All right. And nobody on our side of the table got the whole story. In 90 minutes, everybody on our side of the table at some point kind of daydreamed and looked at that preview and
Looking at their phones.
thought about that weekend plans or thought about the argument they had with their spouse. Right. Nobody got the full story.
Spouses do not argue.
Never. And, but like, but then collectively you did get the right answer. And we didn't do it there because they had already scattered, but like get that crew back in there for a couple of minutes. I'm not talking about adding some massive meeting to your day. Just a quick, run through. Hey, and if you know what you're going to debrief, hey, what was the best thing he said? Did he skirt any answers? Questions like boom, 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 and get to the meat of it. And then that's also going to remind you, hey, we didn't just have that extra little meeting for my sake. That's to remind me to share this with my people and share the right thing with my people.
Yeah, I tell you, the one thing it's amazing to me in situations, and we deal with all kinds of different. We're in meetings all the time. We're in contract campaigns, and we're in a lot of different things, and we've adopted to having hot washes after most of our situations. And it's amazing when you get in a room and you ask people, what do you think we could have done better? And there's always those one or two people that'll tell you exactly what they did right.
Right.
They won't say what they could have done better,
yeah. But
they'll say, well, I did this, this, and this. And that's when you have to say, well, what about this? Why didn't you do it this way? Why didn't you do it that way? It's hard for me a lot of times to work with people that don't take ownership and or won't, look inside themselves and say, hey, I could have done this better. Or I should have did this. I got this out of this situation. That's the frustrating part for me. Yeah. So go ahead.
No, I think when things go sideways, if you're sitting around a table and people are trying to point fingers at processes, it's a lack of leadership.
Lack of leadership.
Like, we need to blame. None of us can own this. We got to blame this on a process.
Well, the thing is, I mean, obviously, I'm considered a leader, and I make plenty of mistakes, and anything that goes wrong in my organization, at the end of the day, is my fault.
Sure.
Because I'm ultimately responsible for it. But it's just funny how when things go well, it's, you're not getting the praise, you're not getting the accolades, and we're not here for the praise, the accolades, but it's amazing how many other people will take ownership of success as opposed to ownership of failure.
Yeah. What's the success has 1,000 fathers, failures an orphan. Yeah. I mean,
that'll be the name of the next podcast.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, how many people took credit for the Bin Laden mission? They all did it.
I mean, right? that's crazy, right?
Yeah. So,
so you just retired from the SEALs when that happened?
No, I was still in. I had just left the command that did that mission. You
didn't capture?
I was not there. I did not get there. It's just a timing thing. It's a rotation. When you're on call, you're on call. I did launch on earlier in 2007. We had a possible situation with him, and we blew out to try to go get him, and didn't work out. Would have been a better story if we got him. But
the SEALs have always been, again, this is an unqualified opinion of myself. The SEALs have always been kind of like the secret, underground, mysterious special forces in the Navy. But through a lot of the missions, like Captain Phillips,
sure,
some of those high-profile situations that happened. I mean, the SEAL teams were prevalent in the news. Was that kind of the evolution of the publicity that the SEALs started to
I mean, everybody in Spec Ops. I mean, here I am on a public podcast. I'm 10 years retired, so I'm not very current. I'm not worried. I'm not giving up the secret sauce or anything, but we all Spec Ops guys kind of really pride themselves on being quiet professionals and not speaking about some stuff. But I do think it's also important to get some stuff out there. The notoriety blew it through the roof, right? Captain Phillips, Bin Laden, things like that got a lot of attention. But there's also there's a million other great things happening.
Is that a good thing, having the notoriety where it's at right now?
I'd rather it wasn't that way.
Right.
I think it leads to some negative stuff at times. I'd rather, I think just let the work speak for itself and just kind of vanish into the shadows,
I mean, it's a great accomplishment. I mean, becoming anything in special forces, whatever branch you're in. And, you can utilize your title as, hey, former Navy SEAL, or former Army Ranger, former Delta Force. And that's great for post-military life. But the notoriety, when you talk about the problems that it causes, what are some of the problems being, so mainstream now?
Well, the safety. I mean, really, honestly, like the way it got blown up with the. Again, I wasn't on that mission. I just left the command. I was out in grad school in Monterey, but like that puts families at risk. I mean, that's huge. If the Boston bombers, you think there's not other folks running around that want to be the next Boston Marathon bombers?
Of course there are.
There's dirtbags all over the country trying to do stuff like so. One, it puts people's in danger and families in danger. So that's not great.
Mm-hmm.
And also like the notoriety, like maybe not 100% of the guys that are seeking out to go into the special operations world are there for all the right reasons.
Mm-hmm.
If you're looking in to get it in because the notoriety and hey, I can ride this later. That's not who you want.
No.
I've got no problem with guys. If you go through
and I guarantee you, there's people that are like that. Right?
Oh, for sure, there are absolutely. They're like, this will be a really good resume builder for me, and I'm going to do something else with it. Luckily, those guys again kind of get weeded out.
Right.
They self-identify pretty early. But I have no problem if you become. I have a great friend. He's one of the best, arguably one of the best snipers in the history of our community, and he teaches shooting. He learned a great skill. He got world class at it, and he's teaching it. The guys we're talking about, other guys who skydiving. Hey, you learn something, you're world class at it. You're going to go teach it and share with it. Same thing. So
it's like pro athletes, right? You have a great career as a pro athlete. What do? You open a camp. You open a facility. Share your skills with other people.
If you can do it on the right level, you're not. There's again, we signed a lot of paperwork, said we wouldn't talk about certain things, or certain don't talk about other people's accomplishments and things like that. But I think the sharing thing is important. But the notoriety, again, maybe a safety thing a little bit, and then also maybe bringing in a few people that are not coming in for the perfect.
So you were in the field the majority of your career as a commander towards the end, right?
I leaned really hard into staying. So I went
17 years.
Yeah, pretty much. I was going to grad school about 17 and a half years in when I went to Monterey.
What was that transition away from combat? You're still a commander in SEALs.
I was climbing when I first went to Monterey to grad school, I was climbing the walls.
And your former team is still out there battling?
Yep, because I've been going 1,000,000 miles an hour. And that chapter, I was basically about a little over 10 years straight, just back to back to back to back, Iraq and Afghanistan. And it's just a blur. You just don't, your mind is just so gripped on getting the missions accomplished, getting everybody home alive, doing all that stuff. There's phases. I'll watch like some documentary, like Netflix 30 for 30. I was like, I didn't even know that happened,
Yeah, because you're so focused.
Because I was so focused on the job
what you had to do,
in my
right?
life. Yeah.
So transitioning back into not civilian life so much because you're still in the military, you're not in the battlefield, but you are still a SEAL, going to take more intense roles, but more or less as leaders, JSOC, all that. What was that like?
The move to JSOC, that's an amazing organization. And
what is JSOC for people?
Joint Special Operations Command. It's the tier 1 level of special operations. It's kind of it's SOCOM Special Operations Command, and like in the two things, Grenada and the Desert One, the hostage rescue in 1979. Those kind of led to the formation of JSOC and SOCOM. And SOCOM was bringing all the special operations folks under one roof, so they're singing off the same sheet of music, using the same tactics, same radios, same weapons, stuff like that.
So you were in charge of the whole operation?
No. I was a cog in the wheel. I was a middle management guy. So,
okay.
Yeah, I mean, I love my role as a troop commander. Definitely middle management. But troop commanders are the senior guys on the ground out leading missions, which I love.
Right.
And so, I leaned into it pretty heavily, saw combat a little bit in the early years after 9/11, and then I did everything I could to keep making sure I was going, because not every SEAL team was going to combat. So boom, 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 going to combat. And then about halfway through that period, I had the opportunity to move up to screen and try to make it up to development group, which is part of JSOC. And I got through that training and then did bulk of my tactical stuff at that level, which is just an amazing group of guys.
Right. So what is that training like for JSOC?
So on our side of the house, there's Army guys as well, and they're world class. They're awesome. Ours is you've got to be in the regular SEAL teams for like 5 to 8, 10 years, somewhere in there, and a couple combat deployments under your belt before you're eligible to like even interview. And then if you put in a package, you get picked up, then you go through another selection and training process, which is almost a year long and really, really demanding. And about
Demanding physically or mentally?
More mentally, because at that point, nobody's a quitter. Everybody, you've already been through buds. They know you're not a quitter. You've been in the SEAL teams. They know you're proficient. It's just, can you think on your own? Can you handle yourself in the worst situation? So it's a mental grind,
Right.
and the training is just off the charts. It's world class training, but about roughly half the guys, or maybe a little bit more, maybe 60% of the guys won't make it through that, and then you finally check in your development group.
What are the guys that don't make it through that?
They go
training
back to
end
the
up-
SEAL teams.
Right, go back into combat.
Yep, go right back to SEAL teams. No shame, guys. Plenty of guys go, doesn't work out. They'll come back a couple years later, try again. But yeah,
Great. So you retired in 2011?
no, January of 15.
Oh, January 15.
Yep.
What was it? What was the decision? Why?
I was at it had been I loved it, loved the job, but it's a grind. And we had three. We just had our third kid, and I knew the path ahead. I was done with. I was getting too senior to go to combat anymore. And while I had some wonderful friends who were senior to me, they're like, "Oh, this tour was so rewarding. This tour was so rewarding." And I just knew.
Now you're in your 40s at this point in time, right?
Yep.
And 2015, and you got a wife, 3 kids.
Yep. And
reality sets in.
well, I knew the path ahead. I knew exactly where I would be if I was still in. And I knew that path 10 years ago when I decided to wrap it up. And I told my wife, I'm like,
And that
look,
path would be CIA, special.
no,
ops?
I'd still be in the SEAL team community for sure. But I would that would have been like demanding command tours, a lot of deployment, no more kicking indoors, going out to combat. Really important stuff, right? But that would have been gone. And I just knew if I said if we're going to go beyond 20, we're doing 30.
Right.
I wasn't going to do 22 or 24 years. If it's going to be, I'm getting out at 20, or I'm going to stay until I'm at least 30, maybe even more.
Right.
And I just didn't want to drag my family through that. It was just too much. So
No, that's a grind. I mean,
yeah,
you think about it. You were gone. I mean, how did you ever figure out the time?
a lot. I mean, I
you were
deployed. My daughters were born. I think I was 12. My oldest Reagan, 12 days after she deployed. 12 days after she was born, I deployed. I was gone for 4 months. Our second girl, Scout, she was born, I think it was 14 days. 14 days after she was born, I was gone for 4 months. Right. And so you just miss. I mean, they don't remember that, but I do,
Yeah.
so it's a grind. And I was very fortunate. My kids started a little bit late. I got a few years with my wife. She started on a normal timeline. I started a little bit later. When I retired, the kids were pretty young. They were 6, 4, and 2.
I mean, the spouses have to be the unsung heroes.
Oh yeah.
And the support
They
network.
are absolute Spartan wives. They've been through, we signed up for it. We know what we're doing.
Right.
Even though they kind of signed up for it and they know what they're doing, they don't. You can't. And when you're deployed overseas, they don't know what we're doing every single night. They're just on pins and needles.
Well, it's got to be a tough transition for the family too. If you're gone so much, they get used to their routines. They get used to,
Oh, sure.
A routine of not having you around, and then you come back in and screw everything up.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's the
the
reality
guys,
of it.
Yeah. No, the guys are pretty clear about like, hey, don't forget. And older guys be like, don't forget, it's her house. You're just showing up. It's like, don't show up and try to just knock out the honey-do list and be there to support, because she's there 24/7.
Yeah, I have a friend of mine that he went away, but it wasn't for military purposes, and he was gone for 4.5 years, and he came home, and it was a tough transition coming home, and his wife's a rock star, raised the kids and everything, and I remember him saying to me, he goes, "This is tough. My wife's undermining me as a parent." I'm like, "Oh, really? You've been gone for 4.5 years. Like, go home, stupid. Shut up."
Yeah.
But no, it's got to be a tough transition back into civilian life.
Yeah, it's definitely been. And it's funny. I had a lot of people, like when I was my first job, I had people a year in, 6 months in, 18 months in, ask me, "Hey, how was the transition? How was the transition?" And I'm like, I'm 10 years retired and it's still going on. And I tell them, I'm like, look, you don't want a guy or a gal from the military to ever 100% get that out of their DNA and be
Right.
something that now you're like the rest of us, and you know what I mean? They have something unique they bring to the fight. Whether they were a fighter pilot or a nuke or whatever they did, they bring something unique to the fight. Like, you want that.
So transitioning from the world of adrenaline, battling, fighting, into the civilian life, I mean, it's got to come at a cost for certain people too. I mean, there's got to be tremendous post-traumatic stress. There's got to be alcoholism, drug addiction.
Yeah, there's a lot.
There's a lot of that.
Suicide rate is scary.
Rate's probably the worst.
Yeah, that's the word. And the post-traumatic stress stuff, yes, there's definitely post-traumatic stress, but statistically, the we kind of self-select out to such a level that the vast majority of guys in the special operations world are kind of wired to be okay with the grim realities of combat. They're, not psychopaths, not sociopaths, but they're just wired that differently that they can, they can handle this stuff and come back. And there's some guys who can't. There's some guys who get completely traumatized, but it's the young Army guy who signed on for the GI Bill who had no interest in doing anything in combat, right? Who's just there for the GI Bill money, so he can go to college. And all of a sudden, he's driving a convoy full of water bottles across Iraq, and they get ambushed, and he has to pick up a gun and kill somebody. Right? That's probably going to mess that dude up for life.
Sure.
Because he didn't want any part of combat, and he got thrust into a terrible situation. Whereas our guys are a bunch of maniacs who want to stare the elephant in the eye.
You trained your whole life for it.
You train your whole life for it, right? And again, there's a tiny fraction of guys who are like, no, that I thought I wanted to do that, and I did it. Now I'm completely messed up. It's very small numbers.
So your younger brother, was a SEAL as well, right?
Yep, he came in a couple years behind me.
Do you ever go at it, saying I was a better SEAL than you?
I mean, he knows I was better. Clearly, yeah, I'm the older brother.
Little sibling rivalry.
Yeah. And so there's a lot. It's funny. There's a lot of sibling. People talk about that. There's a ton of siblings in the SEAL teams. I always call it the big brother challenge. It's generally the older brother goes first, then the younger brother's, well, I can do that.
Right.
But there's lots and lots of brothers in the SEAL teams,
Right.
And uncles. And we had an uncle and dads and sons. But there's no nepotism. Like your dad was a SEAL. Your dad would be a great SEAL. You want to go to Buds? It's on you. You're not getting a free pass. You still got to get through SEAL training.
This is not like Animal House when they're screening Bluto and they say, not Bluto, what was his name? Flounder. And they put his picture up on the wall, and everybody's throwing empty beer cans and saying, but they had to let him in because he was a legacy.
He was a legacy, yeah.
That doesn't happen in the SEALs.
No. No free pass.
Post SEAL life, you've developed this business where you're passing on your knowledge, leadership knowledge. Tell us about some of the programs that you offer through Patriot.
Yeah, so like you said, you went through the one I was in command of. It was towards the tail end of my career. I was in charge of a mission that really went sideways. It didn't end great. And
what was that mission? Was that the last mission?
That was the hostage rescue mission. So we lost the hostage.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, we were tasked with there was a British citizen. She'd been taken hostage by some middle level Taliban guys, and she was in the chaos of stuff was inadvertently killed, and she didn't make it. And then there was some bad behavior. Some people hit some information. So a lot of bad decisions were made, and that's the first one. And taking people through that and experiencing like, hey, what would you do in this situation? You got bad news. Doesn't get better with time. What are you going to do with the decision? You're loyal to your teammate. What are you going to do? Do you tell on this person? Things like that. That's the first one. Built out a whole course around the Pat Tillman story. Mm-hmm. Again, amazing guy. Really tragic situation, friendly fire situation. Again, the guys out in the field, it's not a bash on them at all. They did their best. They had an unfortunate thing kind of unfold. But a lot of other stuff happened upstream later. And so that one's very interesting. I'll teach a course about the Benghazi story. A lot of crazy stuff happened there in Benghazi. I lost Glenn Doherty, who's a Boston guy.
Yep.
Glenn is a buddy of mine. We were SEAL Team 3 together. Good friend of mine. He's a great guy. He was a great guy. He was killed there. And so teach that. And it's getting people really out of their wheelhouse. I know these formats. We've built these courses. We teach them all the time. It's I could take it and put it in any industry, right? And somebody in your world, whatever, you could come up with an ethical dilemma that happened in your world, and we could take this model and build it out for you. And then, but if we come teach it to your team, you guys know your industry so well, you kind of know the right answer. You're like, well, I wouldn't do that. Mike was an idiot. What did he do that for? Right? I would have called so-and-so, right? But when you get people completely out of their wheelhouse, you take a lawyer, a doctor, a teamster and say, hey, jump in this situation, make this decision.
Teamster is always going to come ahead of a lawyer.
Yeah.
Ahead of a lawyer. There's no doubt.
Yeah.
Because we're not in it for the billable hours.
Yeah. But they, just take people out of their wheelhouse and make them make some really tough decisions with crappy information and a crappy timeline, and no good outcomes.
I mean, I think team building is probably the toughest task, and I'll speak from experience, getting people to mesh together, because you got a million different personalities. Everybody, has an opinion that matters.
Sure.
And it's probably the most difficult thing to do. And people are very territorial
Sure.
about what they do in the real world. Especially whether it's unions, corporate America, or whatever you're doing. People have, and I think we get back to what you talked about earlier, being able to do everybody's job, but being a master at one. people don't look at that. They don't want to get out of their comfort zone of learning someone else's job in case they may have to do it. Or they look at it like, why do I want to learn that job? I'm great at my job, but if I learn that, they're going to expect me to do more.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the tough part that I've always found as a leader. Look, me personally, and it's just the way I'm wired, I want to know as much as I can because I'm marketable at that point in time. I can do anything. I can get put in a situation in my world and find my way out of it. Maybe not finesseful all the time, but have enough knowledge to get a result that's positive.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. People don't want to, in corporate America, you're getting paid to do your job. You're sitting there at your year-end comp review, pointing to a number, saying, this is what I did for you. Pay me, pay me, pay me. And if you're a team player, if we're equals and you're a team player and I'm not, I'm just totally focused on my thing, and you're 10% of your time, bopping around, helping other people, learning from other people, that's you should be doing that stuff. But,
right.
But our year-end comp review, you look like about 10% less than I do.
Right.
I'm gonna get paid more than you. And after a few years of that sneaks up on people, and you're like, man, I've been trying to learn and do all this stuff and be helpful, and I took a course on my own dime and and now I'm getting paid less than that guy, and he's an idiot. And all he's doing is crunching head down. He doesn't help anybody.
Yeah, you can't throw him off the team at that point, right?
Yeah. You know what I mean? So, but that's
the worst part is because, like in the non-military world, in the non-special forces world, you have someone in your SEAL team that's not cutting it. You guys are getting rid of them. You police your own.
No, it's we put a lot of work into hiring the right people, because getting rid of someone can be such a disaster. And we saw it in the SEAL teams too. At the tail end, when I went to grad school, we partnered with some guys who were definitely smarter than me, and we wrote a thesis pretty much about talent identification. It was the identification, grooming, and retention of high potentials. And they've actually taken and implemented some stuff that we wrote a decade ago. And but you put a lot of time, energy, and resources and money into hiring the right people. It's so important, because getting rid of someone's such a disaster, right? And the SEAL team's no different. We mentioned my buddy Rich earlier. He wrote the book Attributes. Rich Davini. He's really diving into that stuff. And he's taken a lot of lessons learned from the SEAL teams, how we were identifying the attributes, skills, abilities, personality traits that were most suited for different jobs. And he's taken that out to corporate America to try to avoid that problem. Of getting someone who's not cutting it.
Well, we don't care about corporate America. We care about blue collar workers. How can your program benefit blue collar workers? How can they benefit unions?
I'm completely biased, obviously, but I think any team that wants to be more cohesive, any team that is willing to invest in their people, that wants to have the tough conversations, the ethical dilemmas, like what would you do? Because again, if you think you're just going to wing it on that, no, you're setting yourself up for failure.
Right.
And people they also have this sterile, well, yeah, I would just call the hotline, or I'd just call my boss, or whatever. When you end up in a gut wrenching ethical dilemma situation, it's not going to be some unknown person who works on the 13th floor who you've never met. It's going to be someone on your immediate team kids have played baseball together.
Right.
You know this person, and then you're like, you find out they're doing what? Are you kidding me? What is he doing? Dear God! And it's career ending, or maybe even worse.
Yeah. Well, I always tell people, you make a decision, or if I make a decision, I always got to think about the effects of that decision, not only professionally, but more importantly, how is this going to affect my family? How is it going to affect my ability to provide for my family? And how is this going to affect, most importantly, outside of your family, your reputation? Yeah. And I don't think people think like that.
Yeah, they need to. We definitely have a leadership crisis going on these days.
So what are some of the projects you're working on now at Patriot?
The courses are our main effort, is what we're pushing. We definitely do some coaching here and there. I got a couple guys that do coaching, like life coaching type stuff. To do some smaller group presentations, some keynote speeches, things like that.
So if I'm a local union, I could call Patriot and say, hey, we've got a new leadership team. Come in and talk to us about leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. Come in, give a keynote. A lot of times we'll do, if it's a get to know you, one of us, myself, or one of the other guys will come in and do a keynote and kind of package deal. Say, hey, we're going to do a keynote for the masses, and then the next day we're going to teach one of the courses to your key leaders. And then generally when people once they've gone through the course and seen it, they're like, okay, that was good. We want more. We need to take that out to everybody.
Right.
But the initial get to know you, kind of a package, like we'll do a keynote on leadership to 400 people or how many people you have. And then 30 to 35 people will go through this course the next day. And then they're all going to want to take it out to their teams.
Now, do you try and teach this course at home or around the dinner table? I mean, your wife must be the commander in chief in that house,
she's
right?
the boss. She's the boss.
What about your family life? What's that like?
We're in the thick of it. It's fun. We got 3 teenagers now. We got 17. The girls are 17 and 15, and my son's 13. So we got multiple different kids in different schools. Got looking at colleges for my oldest.
Now, do they know what their dad did for 20 years?
Yeah. They I grew up. They would at bedtime when they were younger. They would always ask, "Dad, tell us a Navy SEAL story. Tell us a Navy SEAL." So the number of stories, the hundreds of stories that I brought down to.
You didn't tell them any classified shit,
probably
did you?
No, probably like PG-13.
They'll be going into first grade, talking about some secret mission that my dad did.
Yeah, my daughters love that one of my buddies who was on the Bin Laden mission was actually one of our babysitters. He lived around the corner from us. So my daughters love the fact that one of my babysitters got Bin Laden.
Well, listen, you think about it this way, right? If you're surrounded by a bunch of ex-Navy SEALs and 17 and 15-year-old daughters, I would assume you're going to have those studs over when the first dates happen, right?
Oh yeah, scare the hell out of me.
All heavily
Well, I always tease
tattooed.
guys would always be like, and you probably see the same thing in sports teams in your world. Guys are like, I would never let my daughter anywhere near Navy SEAL. And I would always tease them because we've got a bunch of guys that are running through life with their hair on fire, but it's an amazing group of people. But I always tell guys, I'm like, look, get your head around it. Like one way or the other, your daughter's going to marry a guy who's either a SEAL or kind of wired like a SEAL, because if you're a good dad, she's going to look to you and be like, that's what a man
who I want
is.
to be with.
That's what a good husband is. That's what a good dad is. So she's going to, and if you're a dirtbag of a dad, she's going to marry one just to spite you.
Right.
So either way,
Accept it.
get over it.
Accept it. What about your son? Is there any appetite for military service or?
I think it's certainly in his DNA, but I don't think my wife would ever let that happen.
No. It's amazing how mothers protect their boys, isn't it?
Yeah. No, the kids are kind of all doing their thing. We got some art going on. We got my middle daughter's way into music, so we're having fun.
If there's anything you could change in your career as a Navy SEAL, looking back, and I'm sure you do a lot of reflecting because you've been through a lot of missions and a lot of trials and tribulations. If there's anything you could change on your career, what would that have been?
Honestly, not. I never lost a guy in combat under my command. Lost a lot of friends. Lost my right-hand man in this training accident. If I could do anything to change that morning, I certainly would. We were skydiving in Arizona. Lost Tommy, and change that if possible. My overall career path, we call it standing on the carpet. When you get in trouble, the boss is going to chew you out. I mean, I stood on the carpet almost every time. I stood my ground for something that I believe was right and came this close to getting fired from multiple jobs. But I wouldn't change it. It was the right thing to do. And I'd make that decision again the same way. So, and then we're a culmination of our path, so not a whole lot I would change. I don't have one catastrophic moment where I did this and this guy died that I would go back and change. But yeah, so I don't know. Not a whole lot.
All right, great. So let's talk about, what's the name of the company?
Patriot Leadership Development.
And how do we reach you?
We're at patriotld.com. That's the website, and easy to get on there. There's a bunch of information. The courses are called Leadership Through Ethical Dilemmas.
Do you have a social media platform as well?
Just on LinkedIn.
On LinkedIn.
Try to get on LinkedIn. We're going to start putting out some more stuff recently.
You're not on TikTok?
I'm not a TikTok guy.
No.
My daughter's.
I wouldn't think what you do would be a platform for TikTok or Instagram or any of that stuff.
Yeah, no, I do the Instagram, just family stuff.
So we can find you on LinkedIn.
Yeah, LinkedIn or the website.
And your website. What's your website again?
patriotld.com.
patriotld.com. Well, listen, I appreciate you taking the time today. This has been fascinating, and just want to personally thank you for your service.
No, thanks for having me here, man.
Absolutely. Thank you.